Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Buckeye Breakdown. Owen Smith, Matthew Warner here after the Buckeyes absolutely destroy the Oregon Ducks. This is our first time on the mic together since Michigan.
Yeah.
So a lot
has happened.
a lot of things have changed. I went solo on a couple episodes. We never. I talked about it, right? But we never got to fully talk about the experience of how we went to a game. We would like to think that we contributed to that win and to this resurgence of Ohio State football by being in the shoe on December 21st. But Matt, we are here. We don't have to, rehash everything that happened, but Ohio State destroys Oregon 41-21. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling great. There's been a trend over the last several years of the new year not starting off on the right foot for myself and for the Buckeyes, and it just feels good that we're sitting here third day into the year and we get to talk about the continuation of the Buckeye season, the dominance that they're currently going through. Like you said, we got to experience a game in the shoe, which was just incredible. Obviously, that was before the new year. So Tennessee, gets absolutely dog walked in the shoe. A little bit of a rude awakening for the SEC. That day, I also won a fantasy football matchup, the next day against you. So that felt pretty good. Did go on to win that league. It's not a huge deal, just $1,200, but so things are really looking up. And man, the boys are buzzing right now. The Buckeyes are playing really good football. This is back-to-back games now that I think you and I both have looked at each other like 15 minutes into the game and we're like, is this real? Like,
dude,
is this actually happening? We experienced it live in person against Tennessee, and I think you and I may have had kind of a similar feeling of like, can we replicate that? Was Tennessee just not very good? Like, but to be able to do it again, not at home, against the number one team in the country. I mean, looking up and seeing 34-0 was just, I was sitting there just with my jaw on the floor. I was like, "This is the best day of my life." Well,
yeah, no, I mean, mine.
Well,
yeah, and your wedding, I'm sure, was awesome, and yeah,
very buzzword.
Yeah. But either way, no, yeah, it's. I mean, even like 14-0, even 21-0, I was like, "Is this just the way that it happened and how, like." The offense was looking so smooth and like just everything was happening with ease. And then the defense was preventing this, Heisman candidate quarterback and this, like, basically the offense that everyone like had all this faith in, like that, like who's going to stop Oregon? I mean, not even 2-3 months ago now, they did put up 32 points on this defense. No one else could do that, but they did. So like coming into it's like, how are we doing this on both sides? And it's like in rhythm together. It's just, I don't know if I can still believe it. Like it is, I think that the fact that the Michigan game happened makes it that much more unbelievable, but it's happening. We're here. We have beaten the third best SEC team and the best or the second best Big Ten team. And like, I think our national championship odds are plus 110. Last time I checked.
Plus 110. We're going to play against a Texas team that's had quite a few injuries. Like it's. We talked about the path in the beginning. You've got to beat an SEC school a week after, or I guess 2 weeks after, just one of the worst performances in Ohio State football history. So you have to host an SEC team. And then you have to go over to the West Coast and beat the number one team, in college football. And now you got to go to Texas and beat Texas. And if if you get past that, you're looking at playing a Notre Dame or a Georgia team. And so we talked about the path in the beginning. It's incredible. The way that we've gotten to Texas is not how I expected. Not even like in my wildest dreams. So let's get into. We'll just start with Oregon. Tennessee's been obviously talked about, quite a bit. But let's get into Oregon. Just start off with play calling. The way that Ohio State approached this matchup was very similar to Tennessee. We are going to get the ball in the hands of Jeremiah Smith and let the best receiver in college football be the best receiver in college football. And you can do whatever you want to try and stop it, but you're not going to. And there were different ways that we did that throughout the game, but a lot of it was just Jeremiah Smith making a play, Will Howard putting a ball in the breadbasket. And so the play calling was phenomenal. And you saw that it also gave the run game an opportunity to get going. I mean, both Travion and Judkins had pretty darn good days. Travion obviously having the 2 touchdowns, the big runs, but everything just seemed to be clicking for the Buckeyes. Do you attribute that to more of Chip Kelly and Ryan Day getting together after Michigan and saying, we're not that team, we will never win as that team, so we have to figure something else out? Or is this just, guys making plays now that maybe they weren't making before? Like, do you think the scheme has changed that much, or do you think that it's more of like confidence and rhythm? Things are happening a little bit more smooth for the offense, and now you're seeing these big plays that maybe we just weren't making before?
I would attribute more, in my opinion, more to play calling and like scheme and coaching overall as to why this looks the way it does. But I don't want to take credit away from Will Howard, Jeremiah Smith, those guys who have also, I mean, we were before the Michigan game, we were talking about, could Will Howard be a Heisman candidate? And then he had that terrible game and he may have been concussed and all of that. But like, if he would have played like this, he would have been the 4th quarterback or he would have been the 4th candidate in New York. And, he wouldn't have won, but he would have been in the conversation just as Dylan Gabriel was. And so I think that there is a step up from Will Howard. I think there has been a step up, which is crazy to think that that there can be a step up from Jeremiah Smith, but there's also 2 more years of stepping up plus his NFL career.
Yeah.
But so I think those guys stepped up, but I do think the overwhelming factor in why you are able to jump out 34-0 and 21-0 and do that in those past 2 games is, I think that it was a mandate by Ryan Day or whoever to go, we have to use our freaking weapons way, like the best in the most creative ways possible, right? Like, everyone knows Jeremiah Smith's on the field. They're only going to know that moving forward, but like, we got to use him. We got to get him in space. We got to just throw him the damn ball if he's one-on-one. Like, why are we just trying to set things up by running up the middle? Like, I would say it's more on Chip Kelly and Ryan Day, and I give them a ton of credit for it. And I think it's, I made this, I talked about it on the when I did the solo episode, where it's like, the 2 times that Ryan Day has stepped into a unit's room, things have changed dramatically, and there's so much credit to give to him. But also, why did it take that? I don't know. That's for a separate conversation. But it's like, after Oregon, he stepped into the defense. Guess what the defense has looked like since then? After Michigan, he stepped into the offensive room more. Guess what's happened since then? So, like, have to give Ryan Day and Chip Kelly a ton of credit. But what do you think?
So there's a couple of multiple times throughout the year, you and I have talked about it on here. I've talked about it with other Buckeye fans and friends of Will Howard struggling with the deep ball. We've now seen games start off. Now, not necessarily how Oregon started off. That was just Jeremiah Smith being Jeremiah Smith and making a huge play on just a crossing route. But the throw against Tennessee to start the game. Like, I've had this thought in my mind of like, if that's short, like we've seen him do in the past, or if it's off and that's not completed, and, you know, the Buckeyes have to either try and kick a field goal or punt there to start that game. First, you start the playoffs off with Will Howard making this tremendous throw, Jeremiah Smith making this tremendous catch. It's felt like since then, Will Howard has just been dealing. I mean, the throws downfield have been really good. The throw to Emeka Egbuka, that was not a very, you know, open receiver. No. He put it in an area that really only you know, Emeka could make that catch. It reminded me of some of the things that Justin Fields did against Georgia. Some of the throws he was making were just incredible, and those were things we didn't necessarily always capitalize on in the regular season. So like, I do think that we have changed the mindset of like, hey, let's not try and start the series off second and, you know, get it to 2nd and 4 and slowly march down the field. Now it feels like, all right, we got the ball. Let's make them pay for us having the ball. Let's go score really fast, and let's get our incredibly good defensive unit out there with a lot of motivation to go get a stop so we can build on this lead. Like, we've seen it twice now where we score really quick, defense gets a stop, we score again, and all of a sudden the team's shell-shocked, down 14-0, and you're just, you know, you've completely set the tone for the game. So I think there's a little bit of like play calling mindset adjustment in what we're doing. But I also think guys are just making plays, and it's fun to watch. Like, Will Howard Unleashed has been fun to watch. You know, they basically, I think they came to the realization of like, he might make some mistakes, you know, might not be perfect on every throw, but we're going to give him a chance to go win football games. And it's the Buckeyes' best chance to win a national championship. So that's been incredible to watch.
It's happening at the right time. Thank God it's happening when it is, man. Because, and again, everybody's going to say it. Every single Buckeye fan is going to say it. Why couldn't we do this before the Michigan game? But, I mean, in some ways, right, you needed to – I guess you need that wake-up call sometimes. But I'm hoping that now that they've had that wake-up call, moving forward, a wake-up call isn't always necessary. Maybe there's just adjustments that you can make. But without losing a game. So, yeah, a ton of credit. I mean, I'm curious to see what happens if this continues with Will Howard, if he continues to make those throws to Jeremiah Smith and Emeka and all those guys. Again, I'm curious to see what happens with his draft prospects. Because, like, I don't think he's ever going to be a day one guy. I don't think he's going to be a first rounder. But, you know, after the Michigan game, was he a 6th rounder? You know, was he like a Sam Ehlinger that you kind of take a flyer on at the end, or a Brock Purdy? Or is he maybe playing his way into like a Jalen Hurts level, you know, 2nd rounder, 3rd rounder type of guy that there's some confidence there, not a first rounder. So I'm curious to see what happens with that, but that's not really for us to worry about right now. So
yeah, that's go win a national championship, and then I will be singing the praises of, you know, draft Will Howard. But let's you know, next game in front of us, and so outside of the offense, you know, we haven't really talked about it a ton, but the offensive line has been incredible, to put it very bluntly. They played against 2 pretty good defensive fronts. And Will Howard's had a lot of clean, open pockets to make plays. We shared some probably justified concerns about the rotation of, you know, guards and, you know, how are you rotating guards in the college football playoffs? How do you not feel like you have, you know, 2 guys set in stone? The rotation's been phenomenal. It has been like, you've got Luke Montgomery coming in and pancaking guys and like really good football players, pancaking guys. And you know, it feels like they've got a pretty good rhythm in what they're trying to do there. And it's nice to see that has much to our doubt in the beginning, has worked out phenomenal. And now you've got some guys that have some pretty fresh legs compared to, guys that may have been looking at 55, 60 snaps. Now you've got some guys that have only played 25 snaps a piece at that guard spot. So huge kudos to that offensive line. You can tell they took it pretty personally after the Michigan game that, they felt like they got dominated, which they did. And they've answered that call really well. Any thoughts, comments on the O-line? Any concerns as we head into Texas? We're going to do a full Texas preview, so I don't want to get too much into that. But any thoughts on that side?
It's just the overall thought is like what a roller coaster Justin Frye's tenure has been, because he is the way that the unit has performed against James Pierce and that Tennessee front, and then against that Oregon front. I mean, there was so much talk about how great and how much NFL talent's on both of those, and the way that he's gotten
James Birch didn't play this game, did he?
Oh, he did.
Did. I was told I knew he didn't play the first game. I just didn't really remember hearing his name in the second game either. I was told that was going to be a massive issue for our offensive line, our makeshift offensive line. I saw a ton of that.
Oh, there was a lot of that
leading up to the game. But
yeah. But yeah, it's amazing. Again, signing day and not getting David Sanders and kind of bleakness overall. And then you get two pretty decent portal additions, plus the way that this unit has been performing. I mean, let's not forget you're losing. I mean, you've already lost Josh Simmons and why am I blanking on his name right now? He's a legend.
McLaughlin Jackson. Oh yeah.
No, but so you're already losing. You've already lost those guys. You're going to lose Donovan Jackson and Fryer, but like the interior of this line is performing pretty well and has a lot of promise. So not only is it good now, but for future state, plus you add some portal things. It's like, well, Justin Frye's here for another year. Unless there's unless things deteriorate against Texas or in a national championship game against who also have good defensive lines. But it's amazing. So I'm very, very happy and very shocked. Because those injuries that did happen were not. I mean, we're talking about a first rounder and the Remington Award winner. So,
right,
great work. Great, both from a play calling. Right, Chip Kelly is probably calling things to protect it, but also like these guys are mauling dudes a little bit and handling their own against some NFL level talent. So,
I remember you and I talking at the beginning of the season. What's the one thing the Buckeyes cannot afford to lose? Is it a wide receiver, running back, Will Howard? Is it somebody on the defense? And unanimous, it was you can't lose offensive line.
Yeah.
Whether it was Simmons or whether it was McLaughlin. I don't think McLaughlin would have been top of the list. It probably would have been Donovan Jackson. But you lost two of your two best offensive linemen at that time. And so, all the credit in the world if they can continue to play at this level and accomplish that final goal that they set out for. Fry's his position is going to be locked in for another year, and we'll do this all again next year where we bitch and complain and and it'll keep on ebbing and flowing. So
always.
Yeah, but no, offense right now, I don't think there's a single Buckeye fan in the world that's going to have too much to complain about outside of people that are still upset about Julian Sands' one throw against Tennessee that was 12 yards short. Another side of the ball that we have really no quandaries with is going to be the defensive side of the ball. Jim Knowles has defenses has opposing offenses just in a mental blender right now. The amount of times that you heard on the broadcast as people were trying to figure out what the hell was going on in this game, that, they just kept saying Dylan Gabriel looks confused. Like he doesn't know what he's looking at. And early on, it wasn't like we were just pressuring the backfield every play. He had a little bit of time. He was scrambling out there. There wasn't a ton open. And so in a game that, or against a team that completely diced us up and hit some of the big plays, for them to respond that way, for the secondary to just pretty much put the clamps on some of those really good receivers was a great response. And man, we've got some guys that are really fun to watch play football right now. What are your thoughts? Who are you most excited about right now on that defensive side of the ball that you think is really the true difference maker? And don't say Caleb Downs, please.
Well, it has to be Caleb for sure. He is the difference maker. I mean, and I can't take credit for this. Again, I'm not an X's and O's guy quite yet. We'll get there. But I was listening to Kings of Columbus, Bill Landis and Doug Lesmerises, and they were talking about kind of the impact that he was making at kind of that. It's almost like there's 4 levels of the defense, right? And Caleb Downs is the 3rd level, where it's like a little bit of a middle ground between the DBs and safety, Lathan Ransom, and then Cody Simon and Sonny. And so like he just is playing this role that like that. I don't know how that's what's causing the confusion. And there's only so many people in this world that can play that position, because it requires so much of there's the physical element of it and the athleticism to play kind of that kind of hybrid role a little bit. But more importantly, the reading of it and the knowledge of an offense and reading that is like that's what allows it to be so effective. And I just, you already put Gabriel, who arguably, and a lot of people, again, Heisman candidate and all that, was arguably the best quarterback going into the playoffs. And you already put him in a blender. We know what Ewers is capable and not capable of doing with some of his, he right. At one point was a top rated prospect and all of that, but also has his own error. I just, overall, I have a lot of confidence in Caleb Downs being able to continue to do that, to really confuse offenses. And the fact that they did it so well against Oregon just gives me all the confidence in the world for future games. But I'll save the other. I think there's 2 other obvious names, but I'll save my breath for you to comment on the others. But who are you most excited about outside of Caleb Downs?
I mean, I think you have to give all the credit in the world to Cody Simon, a guy that just kind of exudes Buckeye football, Buckeye defense. He's playing at a very high level right now. What was it? 9 tackles, 2 sacks, and maybe a tackle for loss in there somewhere as well. I've never seen a more Baltimore Raven linebacker than how Cody Simon's playing right now. He's just flying around the field. He's making big hits. And then, Jack Sawyer is like postseason Jack right now. It's kind of what we saw last year against Missouri. And we're like, wait, can you do that all the time? And then the season, started this year, and we're like, hey, where is that guy? And then,
where's that guy at?
Yeah, Tennessee and Oregon. He's been exactly that person. So those 2 guys to me have stood out. And then, you said it, Caleb Downs being kind of just like the quarterback of the defensive side of the ball, and the leader of that unit, I think, alongside Cody Simon. I think he's just so smart, and it just seems like he's a step ahead of the offense. Like he kind of knows what they're going to do before they know what they're going to do. The one thing I will say is it would have been really nice if he would have got the 2 picks that were thrown right at him.
Yeah.
If that's the biggest issue that we have with him, that he's breaking up passes and really close to making those interceptions, like I'm okay with it.
I'll step in real quick, because it's like those are important things to work on, though, because it's like, they've been at the benefit, and again, I am not complaining here, but it's more of like, okay, like there's still a little room for improvement, because in a game that you're not playing with a 34-point lead or a 21-point lead,
those are massive.
Those are massive. And so like, I'm not going to nitpick anything, but if I
So-
had to.
So I was thinking about this too, and I'm trying to remember if we got one against Tennessee. I don't think we did.
I don't think so.
Have we forced a turnover yet in the playoffs?
I don't. Not that I remember. Definitely not against Oregon. Although we had a lot of hands-on balls and pause. But we had.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't. There was a fumble, but it wasn't lost by Nico.
Okay.
In Tennessee game.
So I was thinking about that of like, everybody's talking about this defense and how game breaking they are, how much they are giving fits to these opposing offenses. Tennessee, I wasn't nearly as impressed just because I think Tennessee's offense is not all that impressive. Oregon, their offense is pretty impressive. They've shown that all year. Penn State's defense is pretty damn good, and they went and put up 36 against them. 30, yeah. So like doing that against Oregon is incredible. And when you sit back and think about us being in these positions without forcing turnovers, it feels like a lot of times teams get in these positions because they go score, they force a turnover, and then they go score again. Like you saw in the Notre Dame Georgia game where not a ton was happening offensively. All of a sudden, Notre Dame kicks a field goal, immediately gets a turnover, scores, and they put points on the board really, really fast. Or maybe it was 2 touchdowns. I can't remember exactly how that went. But I'm waiting to see if there's one of those like huge plays that instead of the Buckeyes having to go 80 yards and go score, they get a forced fumble or an interception where the Buckeyes get the ball at the 20-yard line. And like, it's one of those really, really quick, not that we haven't been scoring quick anyways, but like, I'm waiting to see if the defense can turn one of those pass breakups or one of those sacks, into a turnover, because as good as the defense has been, they haven't done that yet. And I'm not sure if it's more impressive that they're being talked about the way and like everybody's this most dominant defense right now in college football. I don't know if it's more impressive that they're doing it without forcing any turnovers, but I think as you look at Texas, where Quinn has had some issues and had some takeaways this year in some big spots. You look at the possibility of like a Notre Dame or Penn State. Like, can you force them into some bad decisions, like a Drew Aller or Riley Leonard, whoever it may be? Like, those are the things I'll be looking at to see. Like, the one expectation I would set for the Buckeyes is like, you can't expect to be up 3 touchdowns in the first quarter every single game. Like that's the reality is it's not going to be that simple as much as I would love for it to be.
Could be.
Yeah.
It might be. I don't know. We'll see.
I really hope it is, but that's kind of my feeling is like the defense is going to have to come up with one of those big plays when inevitably the offense isn't going to be able to just go out and give you a 3-score cushion to where you can, sit back and, I don't want to say relax, but play a little bit more conservative and, ball in front of you defense on the other side. So that's the one thing I'm looking for. Can we force turnovers? If I had to nitpick one single thing on the defensive side, I think that's the only thing you can really look at.
Defense. That's I think that's the only thing that you can look at there. I mean, they're
maybe containing a 3rd and 15. Those kinds of things. I get it. They happen, but those were some of the frustrating things you and I were like trying to nitpick about during the game, as we were like, why are we complaining up 34-8 right now?
I mean, my reasoning for it personally was like, Oregon is extremely talented just as much as Ohio State is in a lot of ways. And it's like, well, if we can go put up 34 points, why can't they, type of thing. And it's like, when you are giving up, it's like, come on guys. But it worked out. We won the game by 20 points. So I think that's I guess on that note, I think it's important to sing the praises and give credit where credit is due. I do think there's like a couple of things that I am a little worried about, or just like things that can pop up that hasn't hurt us yet, because either we've been playing with the lead or it just hasn't, become a catastrophe. But there's a couple of things I have my eyes on, and really hope that are cleaned up. And I'm confident that the energy that this team is bringing is that they aren't satisfied, so they are going to work on these things. Yeah. But you and I called it out. Brittany, my wife, called it out. Like, why is Hinsman snapping the ball so low? It gave me and I think our friend Jesse called it out. It gave us kind of like McLaughlin, Alabama vibes a little bit. And I kind of noticed it in the Tennessee game. It was hard because we were watching from the stands and, didn't have the greatest view sometimes, but kind of noticed Will Howard having to dip down a little bit. But that's something that can you start at the 10 and you get a bad low snap, and next thing you know, Tennessee
second and 15 or second and 14,
or Texas gets the ball
right
the 10-yard line, right? So what are your thoughts? How concerned are you? Are you concerned? What are your thoughts on the Hinsman low snaps?
Like you said, I think it's obviously something that's going to be addressed. The one thing that kind of freaks me out about that is you haven't had any big issues with it, and then if you make it a point, does it get into a center's head where they're more concerned about the snap than they are their assignment and all the so there's a lot of mental side of that I don't know nearly enough about snapping a football to understand. But the other thing that even if it's not a fumble or anything like that, is it disrupting timing of plays if Will Howard's having to dip to the his left knee for a counter that's going to the right? Do those kind of things impact timing and just the execution of certain plays that we're trying to do? It didn't seem like it happened against Oregon, and I could be completely they could be sitting in a film room right now of look, we were a half a second behind on this because your snap was slow. I genuinely couldn't tell you. So that's kind of I will start the holy crap, I'm concerned if one turns into a fumble, because that can start to be we saw it with Seth McLaughlin, who's a tremendous center, where it completely derailed the football game. So I'm confident it will get fixed. It hasn't been really what I would say an issue yet, so not a huge concern. There is one concern that you and I continue to share, but it's actually I'll say a good concern this time around, which is special teams. Mm-hmm. Luckily, we are not talking about field goals, as we went 2 for 2.
Can we give credit to fielding real quick? Those are big field goals too, especially after he didn't really have much. He didn't really have to worry much in the Tennessee game, other than them putting him for a 50-yarder.
50. Was it 54 yards?
Yeah, something like that.
54 yards in 9-degree weather. Yeah, that's tough.
But give him credit, because he is now only going to be playing in domes moving forward, and played in beautiful weather out in Pasadena. So it's no longer a cold weather thing, and he was able to knock down a couple. So
there's a time to get really hot, and it's right now. And there's a time to not be losing your confidence. I don't know, maybe Auburn.
Oh
yeah. I'll say this really quickly. If Ryan Day ever went out and looked at our kicker the way that that Sark looked at Burt before he went out and kicked the biggest field goal probably of his life, I'd be right on the fire him. Fire him before he gets in. That was one of the weirdest things I've ever seen in my life. But so there's a time to get hot. It seems like he's got some confidence. It's funny, you hear Pat McAfee talk. I don't know if you saw this, but
I didn't know.
Oh, he was Ohio State's got a leg. Ohio State's got a leg. He was sitting there, he was kicking the ball over the net straight down the center. This guy's got a bright future. And I'm sitting there
You watched
Man, have you watched many of our games this year?
The answer is no, but
yeah. So that was pretty funny of like how quickly but like I think those things help continue. Like you're talking about one of the best punters to ever play is sitting there singing the praises of a kicker. Like I'm hoping that Fielding's seeing that and going like, oh, hey, yeah, I am pretty damn good, and I'm gonna keep this rolling. The concern that we had though was more on the punting unit, and it sucks that we're having to talk about it because we punted the ball pretty damn good. Yeah, we had two opportunities to pin them at the 1 yard line, and the team that was in the position to make those plays didn't make the plays. So instead of it being, 1st and 10 on the 1 yard line, it's 1st and 10 on the 25. We had two pretty botched, returns there from our kicking unit. That can change a game in a really big way. Same thing. You're not always going to be punting up 21-0, up 34-0. Like there's going to come a time where you're punting and the difference between it being on the 1 yard line and the 25 yard line is a massive, massive impact on the game. So that is one concern I have. This one feels a lot more fixable than, Jaden Fielding's missing a 33-yarder, or we're only punting it 30 yards and giving them great field position when we have the chance to pin them deep. Do you have? I know you and I are not the X's and O's people on this, but like, is this just a luck of the bounce? Like, guys, it doesn't feel like we've been in the position to pin people at the 1 very often this year that like I can remember. So like, I'm trying to think if like this has been an ongoing issue with that unit, or like the way I looked at it, both of them just seemed like kind of bang, bang, didn't really make the play. That happens quite a bit. For it to happen twice in a game, you're kind of disappointed. But do you think this is like a fixable thing, or do you think this is just the ball didn't bounce the right way and you live with it?
I don't think it's a fixable thing, or I don't know. I mean, it's like, how much weight do you put into it? Right now, like as things are humming as well as they are, like it may not even be a thought in Ryan Days or whoever kind of is coordinating special teams right now. It like may not be a thing. So, and it may just be the luck. I don't know. Just one of them specifically sticks out to me. It's like, dude, you got to get that one.
The one that bounced backwards.
Yeah.
The one that bounced backwards and we took it into the end zone.
Yes,
it's like,
right.
At the bare minimum, that ball should have been at like the 4 or 5 yard line, and instead it's at the 25. I mean, the punt couldn't have been more perfect.
Right.
I think it landed on the 1 and took a quick hop backwards.
Well, it's like if you're going to choose to punt at your own 40 or whatever it was at that point because you can't believe in your kicker, it's like, well, then you got to really execute that punt, because then you might as well just throw a 50-50 ball to Jeremiah Smith, like if you're not going to pin him.
And you know what's funny about that? How was Ozzie?
Yeah.
Have we seen that this year? Because they had both punters out. Both guys punted.
Yeah, that's right.
Kick from our 40 was the Australian kid. I'm almost positive.
Yeah, it's a good, interesting. Because he was the one that was like the big leg, but couldn't keep it straight.
Even the announcers, like when it was happening, they were like, he's out here, he must be their touch guy. And then he kicked a perfect ball, and they're like, seems like we were right. And I'm like, this is the guy that was on Dov Kleinman's Twitter of like, he can kick it 98 yards. I'm like, I thought he was the opposite of the touch guy, but maybe we're completely wrong, and maybe this is why the internet's not always the single source of truth on all things football. But nevertheless, that was an interesting part to see both of them take the field and try something out in a playoff game. Was different to me, but when you're up 34-0, you have the luxury to do those things, I suppose.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, again, these are small things. Don't want to take away too much, but just things that we have our eyes on, and hope that they don't become a factor, but if they do, I hope they're being worked on right now. So,
yeah.
Do you want to get into the last topic, or do you want to save it?
Let's do it now. If we're going to preview Texas, we'll make it quick. Owen and I were talking yesterday. He, I think this was another conversation on Kings of the North of, is Jeremiah Smith the biggest, we'll call it one of the biggest accomplishments of Ryan Day's era. And the reason we, phrase it that way is you're talking about a guy that is a complete game wrecker day one that he stepped on campus, and you get him for another 2 years. And now he's had 2 phenomenal playoff games and is kind of launching you into the betting favorite to be a national champion. And so I kind of had the thought on the other side of it. I think, Owen, you're kind of on the side of like, yeah, this is pretty high up there in accomplishments. Like these guys do not come around very often, like hardly ever. And so it is a massive accomplishment. I had a thought. Does Ryan Day win Jeremiah Smith's recruiting if he is a 25 guy? And so I'll kind of set the scenario here. You've got, let's say Will Howard's still here. You have Emeka Ibuka, who's getting ready to graduate. Julian Fleming probably is still here. Maybe.
He's probably gone.
You don't think he sticks around and plays another season as like the 2-3 option?
Maybe. I don't know. He kind of felt gone regardless. I guess Jeremiah Smith was a big factor on that.
I mean, it basically was like, hey, you don't really have a role in this team. Fleming would have been on the field quite a bit along with Brandon Ennis this year if there's no Jeremiah Smith.
I just feel like Fleming would have gotten pushed out by Ennis and Tate. Maybe
Tate was going to be the 2.
Right. So that's why I'm like, if you can't, go be the 1 or whatever you're considered at Penn State. He's like considered the 6 now.
6, yeah. So
either way,
if
we'll say he's on. He'll say he's maybe here, maybe not.
But let's say you have a very similar season. You lose to Michigan. Does Jeremiah Smith say, I'm going to go be the top dog there with all the noise that was going on after that game? Does Ryan Day have the luxury of grabbing him the same way he did last year? Jeremiah Smith was coming into a little bit of a different situation with Emeka Ibuka. He was going to be probably the 2 in the preseason, but everybody kind of knew he was the 1. Where if he's coming in this year or for next season, it would have been hands down number 1. But there would have been this stigma around the program, and I truly don't believe we have a chance of knocking off Tennessee and Oregon in the way that we do without Jeremiah Smith. So, I think you're talking about a much different program. So do you think Ryan Day has the same ability to go grab Jeremiah Smith if all things are even, and let's say, he's got to make that decision, obviously, before the playoffs start, all things even, you think he grabs him?
Yeah, well, yes, I think. Because I think Emeka would have had a bigger year than he had, so it would have been like the production still would have been there. It wouldn't have been the same because it's not Jeremiah Smith, but he is still an NFL wide receiver. So that production still would have been there. The difficulty is like things were pretty dark, but things were also there was no playoff hope last year. Right. So you still lost the game. Now, yes, you lost to the national champion in hindsight, but you still lost that game. You still were not in the playoffs. And honestly, at the point that he committed was it seemed a little darker, at least at that time. And it's difficult because you can't factor in Tennessee and Oregon to this equation.
That's what I'm saying. So
hard, but
it was really dark after last year, and you would have been looking at it was much darker this year, in my opinion. Last year we lost to the number 1 team in the country.
But Miami,
I know.
Not even a lick of playoff hope. Well,
I,
no, not even a lick at that point because they had already lost. Yeah, they had already lost, so they weren't even in the playoffs. And that was like the biggest competitor for it.
I'm of the mindset that if he was 25, Miami would have ended up stealing him from us. That's where I'm at. If you were, I mean, it was pretty darn close last year.
It was, but you still have Hartline, and Hartline is like
I know he's like the beacon of hope for wide receivers of like I'm going to go here and just and be an NFL guy here, in 3 years. But I had that thought as we were talking about like the biggest accomplishment of like, what if he was a year later and all things are even and we have the one loss to Oregon and then lose 13-10 to Michigan. Like I think things would have been dark enough and vibes around the program would have been low enough that he would have been more inclined to maybe take a little bit more money from Miami and go play in Florida.
Yeah.
But the good news is we don't have to worry about that.
We don't have to worry about that.
It was just something that popped in my head. It was like the same thing of like, can you imagine if Marvin Harrison Jr. and Jeremiah Smith were in the same class and you got the same two guys, like if they got to play football together, what that would have done to defenses, if he was a couple years before. But the good news is we have Jeremiah Smith now, and we are going to have him for hopefully the next 2 years, but certainly for the upcoming matchup against Texas, which is basically a home game for Texas, I'll call it. They're going to be in-state, won't have to travel quite as far. That is going to be Friday, January 10th at 7:30. Owen and I will be back on Monday with Monday, January 6th, as long as we're not super tied up in Washington, D.C. that day. We will be back on Monday to do a preview of the Texas game and kind of give our thoughts on that specific matchup, how we're feeling, and really happy that we're talking about this matchup compared to what we were talking about last year at this time. So, any closing thoughts, anything from your side before we
just 100% have to do an episode Monday to beat the allegations.
I know it's, I had to throw that in. I was like, we're going to be going live on January 6th. I already know our friends are going to make jokes about it. So, So any,
excited. I want to look more into Texas. I've watched a fair share of them between SEC championship and their past two matchups, of course. So curious to see kind of how some of those matchups look for the Buckeyes, but we'll break that all down. And thanks everybody for listening and tuning in, and hopefully have a few more of these, very high vibe episodes, because things can be either pretty dark, but there's a lot. I mean, I think the overall thought is that we are in like the highest of highs right now in Ohio State football in a very long time. And I think that not only can you look at that and say that now, but I do think that you can also ride this high into 2025, which we will do. Regardless, I think we will, we'll be around to create content and break down the 2025 roster as well, but let's enjoy this ride now. So we'll see you guys again on Monday, and thanks for tuning in and enjoying this ride with us.
Absolutely. Go Bucks.